Ethan Mercer had been driving for almost 7 hours when the storm finally swallowed the highway. Rain poured across the windshield in silver waves, blurring the road ahead beneath the dark skies of Washington. The radio crackled softly between old country songs and weather warnings. Heavy rainfall expected throughout the Cascade region tonight. Ethan barely listened. His hands rested loosely on the steering wheel, while endless pine forests stretched beside the lonely mountain road. He was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes in one night. A deeper kind. The kind carried quietly for months, maybe years. The city had drained him slowly. Endless office lights. Endless deadlines. Endless noise. Every day blending into the next until he could barely remember the last time he had truly rested. That was why he had left Seattle that afternoon without much of a plan. Just drive north, he told himself. Find quiet. Find somewhere the world feels slower. Now, hours later, the storm had become so heavy he could barely see the road lines ahead. Rain hammered the roof of the truck. Wind moved through the tall evergreens like ocean waves. Fog drifted low across the asphalt. Ethan sighed softly and slowed the truck as another sharp curve appeared ahead. Then he saw it. A small wooden sign standing beside the road. Rainfall Lake Cabins, 2 miles. The old sign leaned slightly beneath the storm, illuminated briefly by his headlights before darkness swallowed it again. Ethan almost drove past it. But something about the name stopped him. Rainfall Lake. It sounded peaceful, like the kind of place forgotten by time. He turned onto the narrow gravel road. Immediately, the forest closed around him. Tall pine trees towered overhead while rain poured endlessly through the branches. The gravel road twisted gently through the darkness, deeper and deeper into the mountains. No other cars. No houses. Only forest. Only rain. The deeper Ethan drove, the quieter his thoughts became. The storm softened somehow beneath the trees. Not weaker, only calmer, more distant. By the time he finally saw the lake, he almost didn't believe it was real. The water stretched silently through the darkness beneath drifting silver fog. And beside the shore, a row of tiny wooden cabins glowed warmly beneath the rain. Golden light shimmered across wet porches and rain-covered windows. Smoke drifted lazily from stone chimneys into the cold mountain air. The place looked impossibly peaceful, like a memory. Ethan parked beside the nearest cabin and switched off the engine. Silence filled the truck immediately. Well, not silence exactly. Rain. Soft rain tapping against the roof. Wind moving gently through pine branches. Water lapping quietly against the lakeshore nearby. For the first time in months, Ethan exhaled fully. He stepped outside. Cold mountain air wrapped around him instantly. The scent of cedarwood, wet earth, pine needles, and rainwater filled the night. Somewhere across the lake, a loon called softly through the fog. The sound echoed beautifully across the dark water. Ethan grabbed his duffel bag and walked toward the cabin porch while rain dripped steadily from the roof overhead. The wooden steps creaked beneath his boots. A warm yellow light glowed beside the front door. And taped neatly to the window was a handwritten note. Cabin 3 is ready for you. Key is inside. May. Ethan frowned slightly. He hadn't made a reservation. But honestly, he was too tired to question it. He opened the door slowly. Warmth greeted him immediately. The cabin smelled like burning firewood and old pine floors. A stone fireplace crackled softly in the corner while amber lamps filled the room with gentle golden light. A thick wool blanket rested across the couch beside a rain-covered window. Everything inside felt warm. Still. Safe. Rain tapped steadily against the roof while Ethan quietly closed the door behind him. For a long moment, he simply stood there listening. The fire. The rain. The distant lake. Something inside him began loosening slowly, like tension melting quietly away. A kettle suddenly whistled softly from the tiny kitchen. Ethan blinked in surprise. He walked over carefully. Beside the stove sat a small handwritten card. Tea helps during storms. Below it rested a jar of chamomile tea and a clean mug. Ethan smiled for the first time all day. "Thanks, mate," he whispered quietly to the empty cabin. Outside, rain continued falling endlessly across the mountains. An hour later, Ethan sat beside the fire wrapped beneath the wool blanket, while steam rose gently from his tea. The storm had settled into a steady rhythm now. Tap against the windows. Soft wind through trees. Water dripping from the porch roof. The sounds blended together perfectly, almost hypnotic. He stared out the large window facing the lake. Fog drifted slowly across the water beneath the dark sky. Tall pine trees disappeared into silver mist along the shoreline. Everything felt dreamlike here. The city already seemed impossibly far away. Ethan leaned back into the couch and closed his eyes briefly. That was when he heard footsteps outside. Slow footsteps crossing the wet porch. He opened his eyes. A moment later, a soft knock came at the door. Ethan stood and opened it carefully. An older woman stood beneath the porch light wearing a dark raincoat and holding a lantern. Her silver hair moved gently in the wind while rain shimmered around her. "You made it through the storm," she said warmly. Her voice sounded calm, comforting. "You must be May." She smiled softly. "And you must be tired." Ethan laughed quietly. "Yeah, little bit." May lifted the lantern slightly and looked toward the lake. "Storm like this usually brings people here when they need rest." Rain continued falling softly around them. Ethan wasn't sure why, but her words felt strangely personal, like she already understood him somehow. May reached into her coat pocket and handed him a small object. An old brass key attached to a wooden tag. "Boathouse," she explained. Ethan blinked. "At this hour?" May smiled again. "Not tonight. Tomorrow morning." Then she looked toward the dark forest surrounding the lake. "The rain usually clears people's minds around here." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only rain filled the silence between them. Finally, May nodded gently. "Sleep well, Ethan." And with that, she disappeared into the storm. That night, Ethan slept deeper than he had in years. Rain fell endlessly against the cabin roof while wind moved softly through the pines outside. The fire crackled low beside the room. The lake rested quietly beneath drifting fog. And somewhere during the middle of the night, Ethan dreamed. Not strange dreams. Peaceful ones. He dreamed of standing beside the lake at sunrise while silver mist floated across the water. He dreamed of hearing laughter somewhere deep among the trees, of warm summer mornings, of simpler days long forgotten. And through every dream, rain continued falling gently in the distance. Steady, comforting, safe. When Ethan finally woke the next morning, soft gray light filled the cabin. The storm had weakened overnight into a gentle drizzle. For several moments, he simply lay there listening. Rainwater dripped softly from tree branches outside. Birds chirped faintly somewhere beyond the mist. The lake moved quietly against the shore. And for the first time in a very long while, Ethan felt rested. Truly rested. Not just physically. Something deeper inside him felt quieter too. Lighter. He sat up slowly and noticed another handwritten note resting beside the fireplace. "Take the boat out before sunset. The lake tells stories when it rains. May."